They might not immediately look like it, but these are video game maps. Each represents a specific game, but they also represent the patterns of world design. Something I've come to learn about open world games is that they either do this, or this. It'll make sense. Probably. Open world game design has changed drastically over the last couple of decades, albeit with a steady pace of evolution. Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse, and even less often do games do something completely new. Too many fall into the trap of repeating the same tired old Ubisoft trends, usually Ubisoft. Others fall into the trap of making a world that is entirely too large or just lacks any real direction. Complete freedom is great, but we do still need direction on a mechanical level. These are video games, after all, and even a sandbox needs a reason to exist. So what makes a good, interesting open world, and what are the patterns? And is there a way that we can take each of those aspects and put them into the ultimate open world? Well, probably not that. I don't think we'll ever have a unanimously agreed upon best open world ever, objectively, but we can explore some notable video game map designs and try to understand what actually makes for the best approach when creating an open world. And more specifically, why is it these things? First, a video game map that is almost a decade old at this point and has been in front of us this entire time. In front of you, behind me, it's this. This is the Kingdom of Hyrule from the hit 2017 Nintendo Switch launch title, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And if you look right here, you'll see the Great Plateau. This acts as the starting point for your journey, and though the world expands vastly beyond this point, it's sort of like a mini open world within the open world. It's designed to give you both freedom and direction. You're supposed to make your way to this tower here, then spot the 4 shrines, and then figure out how to get to each of those shrines. And while you can do whatever you want, there's still guidance to it. This is literally by design. This is the game's tutorial. It gives you a taste of what you can expect from the whole game in just this starting point, including the freedom that comes with it. You might end up chopping down trees to cross this ravine, and then climbing up this very conveniently ledge-placed cliff with movement speed increasing mushrooms growing on it. You might pass the gates to the snowy area and then realize you're freezing and spot these spicy peppers just by the doorway. You might end up in the forest and learning about how fire spreads through grass and updrafts are created from the heat. This miniature open world is designed to let you learn the fundamentals of the game, but it won't force you to actually learn it. Anything you don't encounter, you probably will at some point in the future, and you'll just have to learn it then. To even get this early game warm clothing to stop you from freezing, you have to actually go and read the old man's journal to learn about a recipe, and then figure out that recipe, and then take it to him so he'll give you the clothes. But nothing tells you to read that diary. Nothing tells you to go to that hut. Nothing tells you to even go anywhere near that hut, realistically. The only things you have to do here is to go to each of the shrines, which are basically tutorial dungeons that let you learn about the tools that you'll have throughout the entire game, and then you have to go to the Temple of Time and use your points to get either a stamina upgrade or a health upgrade. That's it. You might never get the jumper. You might never even learn about warm food recipes. You might have just gone to the freezing area and brute forced it by eating loads of healing items to deal with the cold damage. That works. If you want to do that, you can. You might not learn about the flames or the wind or the physics of how this game works, and the game is quite happy for you to not learn that at this point, and you'll just figure it out at some point later. Once you're done on the Great Plateau, you can hop off, float down, and then you're in the Kingdom of Hyrule to do whatever you want. Your first actual quest marker will lead you to Kakariko Village to the east, but hey, you don't have to. If you do go there, of course, you'll learn about the 4 major quest markers of the game, which will lead you into each region of the map. Now, you don't have to do this in any particular order. This map is not broken up into scaled difficulty or leveled off regions or anything like that. It's just a world. And if we simplify it, it looks like this. That is the Kingdom of Hyrule. As soon as you leave the Great Plateau, you'll probably want to go and look at the center of the map because that's where Hyrule Castle is and Hyrule Field surrounding it. But whether you're chasing the actual main objectives or if it's just of your own volition, you basically just have these directional options of where do you want to go first? Do you want harsh deserts, snowy mountains? Do you want a volcanic region, maybe some rainy cliffs, or perhaps a deep jungle? A complete mashup of varied and exciting biomes for you in every direction. And despite being one of the most revolutionary open world games of the past decade, I love how simply it's designed when you really break it down to this level. But let's not get stuck on Hyrule Kingdom, because there is another type of open world design that was used in a more recent game. This is the Lands Between from 2022's Elden Ring. Much like Breath of the Wild, this map wants to give you that complete freedom right from the get-go, but it does give you some direction and some restrictions. Now, those restrictions could be that you're missing a key item, or it could just be that it's kicking your ass and sending you running back home to the maiden you don't have. But let's start from the beginning. This is Limgrave. Now, this is sort of like Elden Ring's version of the Great Plateau. It is just a smaller map within the overworld itself that kind of gives you the freedom to go and explore things and just understand how everything works. But you're not required to do anything here at all like you are in Breath of the Wild. Instead, you could just head straight east and be greeted with this living hell. Now, this should be enough to dissuade you from going any further, but you can. If you want to, you can. Or you could just ignore Limgrave entirely and go straight up to the game's first legacy dungeon, Stormveil Castle. Now, this castle is complex and it's full of things to explore, NPCs to meet, secrets to discover, and bosses to conquer. Or, just ignore it and walk around it if you want. Then you'll find yourself in Liurnia of the Lakes, where you'll see the Academy of Raya Lucaria waiting for you in the distance. This is yet another region full of delves, bosses, NPCs, secrets, and of course, the second legacy dungeon to make your way through. Or again, you could just walk past it and try to carry on to the next region. But joke's on you, because there is a giant, impassable cliff that requires 2 key items in order to activate the Grand Lift to get up to the Altus Plateau. So, unless I can interest you in the secret passage, it's free. Essentially, the map design of Elden Ring wants you to pick up on the hints along the way and to gradually make your way through the progression of the game in sort of the order that it lays out for you. But you don't have to, of course. In fact, you could just start a new game and then walk straight up to the base of the Erdtree, if you know the path. That's not the end of the game, of course, because you're still then restricted and have to find your way to the mountaintop of the giants, which you need key items for. But it is really fun how much you can just ignore and go and do what you want. But it's not just freedom that makes a good map design, of course. It is that direction. So let's take a look at the structure in the same way that we did Breath of the Wild. It's a spiral. So far, these 2 games have 2 different structures to how the maps are actually designed and direct you throughout them. But that makes sense because these are 2 different experiences altogether. But then it's interesting when we take a closer look and find the crossovers in these patterns. But what do I mean by that? Well, we have Breath of the Wild's map here with its outwards approach to the structure, and we have Elden Ring's map with the spiral approach to the structure. But if we take a look at specifically the Great Plateau, that's a spiral. Similarly, if we take a look at Elden Ring's DLC map from Shadow of the Erdtree, we'll see that this more closely resembles something that goes outwards rather than spiral. That's kind of interesting. As soon as each of these games tries to isolate their whole experience into a smaller, condensed form, they switch methods entirely. Now, is that a coincidence? Probably yes. I don't think they were thinking about it like this at all, but it is interesting to see the patterns. And that's where we can start trying to find the patterns in other sandbox games as well. This is Subnautica, a game with no actual in-game map for you to view. You do get these little holographic scans of the map throughout the experience, but it never gives you the full picture. The full picture being this. This is the uncharted world of Subnautica. Now I know what you're thinking. That is just Hyrule, but underwater. No, it's not. But it does follow the same rules. You start here in the middle and you have to explore outwards into each region bit by bit. With no map visible in the game itself, this gradual exploration outwards from the central point is key to how the game is designed. And while it's an entirely different game from Breath of the Wild, you can begin to see how these structures sort of follow the same pattern. Now, of course, at the start of the video, I mentioned this pattern and this pattern, but there's also this one. So where does that come into play? Now, Breath of the Wild, Elden Ring, and Subnautica are all games that are heavily focused on exploration. You're supposed to go out and explore the worlds they give you and follow that structure that they kind of lead you along, but all of these little bits that branch off from that path, that's all you. That's just your curiosity. Now, the thing we can link between all three of these games is what I want to call backseat narrative. Breath of the Wild, Elden Ring, and Subnautica all do have deep and interesting stories, but they're kind of weaved into the experience. Those stories are told throughout the world itself, throughout the lore, and just throughout your time in the game. The narrative elements, though still rich, take a backseat to allow the world to do the heavy lifting. And that leads us to this, the tree branch. This is Red Dead Redemption 2, one of my favorite open worlds of all time. The world it offers is beautiful and full of detail to explore, but it's not a game about exploration. It's a heavily narrative-driven experience about the Van der Linde gang across their gradual journey through several US states. Now, if we're following the narrative structure of the story throughout the game world itself, we end up with a roughly 60-hour path that looks something like this. From the mountains down to Valentine, and then crossing over to Rhodes before getting to Saint-Denis, and then this gradual push up north. Now, of course, it is not a linear game, and exploration is still encouraged through side missions or even main story missions sending you off in different directions. With that in mind, you really end up with a path that looks something like this. Now, that's a tree branch if ever I saw one, and I've seen one at least once. It kind of parallels that outwards approach of Breath of the Wild or something like that, wherein you're branching off into different directions, but instead of a central point, that central point follows the narrative of the game throughout the world itself, meaning you branch off at several different points along your experience. Now, this is a simplification, of course, and is just a general depiction of what your experience in Red Dead Redemption 2 might look like, but it is kind of symbolic how this line ends up looking more like a timeline that actually represents the narrative of the game itself. Let's look at another example of a narrative-driven open world with The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. Now, this game does have a few different maps, of course, with White Orchard at the start of the game and Skellige for the latter half, but we're going to focus on Velen up to Novigrad. Narratively, you'll end up with a path that looks something like this. Loosely, that is. It's been a while since I played it, so you don't have to tell me if this is not 100% accurate, because it's probably not. But like Red Dead Redemption 2, there's going to be a lot of branches that come off this line, and especially in a game that is as heavy on side quests and location markers. So then we end up with something more like this, which again is kind of like a tree branch that tells the story of where we've been. Now, there's going to be some stronger examples than others throughout different games, but it is interesting to see just how often we can find these sort of patterns in how the open worlds themselves are structured, depending on the type of game that it is. And it won't be every map, of course. Here's the map of GTA 5, which ends up looking more like a mess of lines of everywhere you've been, back and forth throughout the city, and especially when you factor in 3 different characters. It's something. That's less tree branch and is more like a hedge that is long overdue for a trim. Some video game maps might actually just lock you out of later game areas until a certain point in the story, like with earlier GTA games or even Ghost of Tsushima, and other games will do this kind of regional level system where it's just not feasible to go there until you are strong enough. But I find all of this really interesting to think about and try to break down different maps into these structured patterns. World design is a really wonderful thing, especially when it's designed in a way to give you direction and purpose without actually getting in the way of your freedom at all. The gentle push into an experience that sends you spiraling throughout the entire map itself, throughout your experience, or the game might just tease you with things in the distance. And so from this central point, you head out and you come back, and then you think, well, what's in the other direction? And off you go again. Or maybe it'll be something more directed like this, where your path is going to resemble that of other players, but you'll still have an entirely unique experience. You just branch off in different directions whenever you want, but your overall line is going to be very similar. Open world game design is at its best when you've got complete freedom to explore this amazing world, but there's also direction that's being fed to you in a way that you never really notice. It never holds your hand or tells you explicitly what you should be doing right now, but instead it feeds you that information through the world and the structure and the aesthetic in a way that perfectly balances that direction with that sandbox experience. Too many games don't do this sort of thing at all, and it ends up making the world feel too big or overwhelming in a way that you don't really feel like you have any sense of direction, or they'll do the complete opposite and have way too much direction and hand-holding that you feel like maybe this should have just been a linear experience. If you play a lot of open world games, take a look at the maps themselves and try to see what the structure is actually like. And especially if it's a game you've played multiple times, does that path kind of correlate between your different playthroughs? See if you can spot patterns there, and if it's a game that you want to play again, try going off in a completely different direction from what you feel like you naturally should be doing, and see what kind of experience that leads to. So now what do we do with all this information? Literally nothing. But it was fun to think about.